Absolutely.
All right, we're live on Facebook. You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in absolutely gorgeous Northport, Florida. I've got a very, very, very special guest in the house, a first-timer, Greg Ordmandy from Raymond James. Did I say that correctly?
You did, yes.
How about that? That was my first practice attempt at your last name, so that was pretty good. So tell us first off. I'd like to take a few minutes and introduce you to everyone that's out there. So kind of give a little bit of your background, where you came from, and what you're doing today.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Greg Ordmandy. I'm with Raymond James, specifically the Somerville Financial Group of Raymond James here in Port Charlotte. I have two partners that I work with, Neil Kazanovsky and Randall Francis. They've been here 20 years, actually working as partners for 20 years, so longer than some marriages, right?
Yep.
I'm originally from Long Island, but I've lived in the community for over 20 years. I have a wife, Cassandra. She teaches at Port Charlotte High School. Two children, 17 and 9. In terms of my background, before I came into financial advising, I guess my story would start at around 17. I joined the military. So I went to Iraq for about 15 months in 06 and 07. And then I left the military in 2008. And just kind of, this ties into, I think, my overall story, right? So I think that my time in service, putting on the uniform is, it's powerful, right? Like that sense of service, that sense of doing something greater than yourself. And it feels good. And I think that that's something that guys struggle with once they get out of the military, is that you were just doing this thing that was so important, and now you're kind of left with, what's my sense of purpose now, right?
Right.
So I felt the same. I got out of the military just by sheer timing of it. It was 2008, which was an unfortunate time for a lot of people. For me, I just got done doing 15 months in a combat zone, and while plenty of guys came back and spent that on cars and parties, I felt like I wanted to be worth more than that, right? I didn't just go through everything I went through for it to be gone like that.
Right.
So I actually bought a couple of rental properties, and I started college. So finished my degree, and then after that, I fixed up one of those rental properties, sold it, and worked out okay. So I went and tried it again. I think it was about the second property I did, and it was in Northport actually. Second property that I did, where again I had that sense of service, of community, and that's maybe sounds odd for somebody rehabbing homes, but it really was, because this house was dilapidated, been sitting there for probably 5 years at that point, just in really bad shape. And neighbors kept stopping in and kind of, asking, what do you guys got going on? And they're getting excited. Sure, they were even more excited once we sold it for what we sold it for, right? Because that helps property values.
Right.
But it was cool. It was cool to see the community engaged and to feel like you were doing something that people appreciated. So fast forward a few more years of that, and I had the opportunity to join Raymond James. And I think there too, kind of the deciding factor for me was when I was sitting down talking with the team, and they were kind of describing to me their philosophy, I guess, and what they enjoyed about the job. It really resonated with me. And I'd say that it is my favorite part. They were 100% right. Developing community relations, giving back, having those bonds with clients, and just feeling like what you do is really genuinely important. It's been huge. So it's kind of me.
I like how you coupled that with the military, because it's kind of ingrained in you in the military. You're kind of like this big family. Everybody's kind of from a melting pot when you first get in, and you got all kinds of brothers and sisters there that you didn't have before. And I served not in wartime, but I was in the Air Force, so I 100% get what you're saying, because when you get out, it's like you're trying to figure out what's the next mission, where are we going, what are we doing, how can we keep everything together. And I kind of struggled with that myself. I went right back into, believe it or not, I was a sheet metal welder when I was in the service, and in CE, and went right back into medical, and started working with mentally handicapped, and went on from there. But it's interesting when you start breaking things down on where you are today and where you were, and how they actually work hand in hand. The teaching and the background that you had in the military, how does that work out with you and Raymond James?
So I think, it's been phenomenal, right? I think Raymond James would attest to this in general, not just with myself, but with other veterans. You bring a certain rigor to anything that you do, right? Because the military is just very stringent in its protocols, and they have a high expectation, and rightfully so, because there's a lot on the line, right? So you learn a sense of responsibility and discipline that's really kind of hard to replicate outside of the military force, I think. But for those who carry that with them, and many veterans still do, I think, we bring that into the endeavors that we have after the fact. That's that sense of rigor and responsibility, and just kind of tirelessly getting after it. So yeah, I would say that's definitely played a role in everything that I've done. In college too. I think about what I would have done in college had I gone at 17, right? Versus after the military, I finished with a 4.0, perfect GPA. I don't think I would have done that directly out of high school when I was still, a knucklehead, right? But the military instills a certain sense of values.
Well, and I'm glad you used the word knucklehead, because we all go through that. It's when you realize that you have to start making some tougher decisions, and maybe looking more than a week down the road, maybe 5 years down the road, where you're going to be. And it's that the fact that you came out of the service and had the fortitude to look forward. That's a big deal, because that's I think one of the hardest things to instill in others, even right now. And, you could say you came from the blue collar background. I do.
Right.
I call myself a blue collar realtor. I just put my head down and grind and go to work every day.
Right.
So it's a blue collar style workmanship versus the white collar, and I like that work ethic, because, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, because we did have a quick discussion on the phone the other day.
Mm-hmm.
What took the fear out of you to go to work for Raymond James? Because, and I'm going to draw a line together with this, that a lot of people have fear of investing or listening to others about investing. So I want to put those two together, and I don't want to say that you had fear in joining, but there had to be some hesitation of sort when you first started looking at going to work for Raymond James. So
absolutely.
I want you to draw those two things together for me.
Sure. Yeah. So for myself, in terms of the hesitation, there was a lot, right? There was a lot of hesitation because, for one, I had a successful kind of business model at the time, right? So I was doing well already with the real estate thing. So I was going to make this very abrupt shift into something entirely different. On top of that, I was very acutely aware of there is a lot of responsibility that comes inherently with this job, right? You're dealing with people's finances, you're dealing with their life savings. And so, there's a lot of trust and a lot of expertise that's required, and it's a big commitment. So I would say how that relates for me to, the military would be that, and this applies to pretty much every aspect of my life. And in the military, you very much learn how to put one foot in front of the other, right? Because it's not natural to, and I'm sure that you've heard this echoed elsewhere, but it's not natural to run towards danger, right? To run towards the firefight. You're trained to do the opposite, right?
Right.
And so, or not trained, but you inherently want to do the opposite. So you're trained to go into that building knowing full well that there's likely a threat on the other side of that door, right? When you're getting ready to load up on the helicopters and fly into an area that you know full well, you're likely to make contact as soon as you touch down. And you just one foot in front of the other, right? And you trust your training and you just get it done. So it's kind of the same thing here. It's like there was there was definitely concern. There was some reticence, but I knew that as long as I did the tasks that were put in front of me and I tackled them to the best of my ability, then there would be this unfolding, just like there was in everything else that I've done, right? So I had that sense of confidence. And also I had a deep desire, because I really did want to continue to have a job that I felt like I was giving back to the community, and my team is very strong about that, having this kind of holistic planning. So it's not just as simple as, stocks and bonds, right? There's just a whole lot more that goes into it. So, and I think that how that connects to maybe other people then, because you're right, a lot of people have a hard time. There's kind of a mental block of taking that initial step and getting in front and talking to an advisor, right?
Yep.
And how do they overcome that? Well, I don't know, maybe through education, right? Maybe that's where it is. That's what we hope for. I think programs like this, where you can just have a conversation, it's part of the reason why we offer consultations, right? So that, look, no skin in the game. 9 times out of 10, probably 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to come in here and either you're going to walk away with something new, a new piece of information, or I am. And to me, that's a win-win, right? That's great. It's going to cost you nothing, and we can learn from each other. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is just getting that message out there, is letting people know, what do advisors do? Because I think that's a question that a lot of people have. I often, people ask me what I do. I say, I'm a financial advisor. They're like, it doesn't resonate, right? It just doesn't click.
Well, I think that's a fearful title for a lot of people.
Right.
I do. The more people I've talked to in the past about anything financial, it seems like you get the clamp down. It's, I'm not going to discuss any of this. I'm not going to get cornered.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the information that's being used. Now, you used a couple words in here, and I'm going to swing back and finish that thought. But I want to ask you, because you used holistic. I got the word holistic out, but you said something holistic management, financial
holistic planning, yeah,
or planning. First, I want you to explain that, okay? Right. Because terminology that you're using is, I think, less abrasive when you say that, because it caught my attention. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when I try to describe, what we do to somebody, I guess where I would start is I would say, so primarily we're going to do 2 things, right? First, we want to kind of nuance it down, discover what is important, right, to the client. Now, people, when they first think about a financial advisor, when they first come into my office, it's usually, I want to make money, right? What have you got for me, kid? Let's make some money. But that's really, as you start to refine that and have the conversation, you find that, well, what does that mean for you, right? 5 years from now, how are we going to judge whether or not this has been successful thus far? And then the conversations get a little more interesting, because it might be, well, I really want to spend a little more time with my grandchildren, right? I want to make sure that my niece goes to college. I want to be less stressed. This is a common one. I want to be less stressed about retirement. Greg, I'm getting really close to retiring, and I've done well saving, but I'm nervous about going from taking a paycheck to living off of a check derived from my investments, right? And so those are entirely different conversations. So you kind of start there, and already you've made a huge leap, because you now have a little more focus on what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then a much better metric to judge whether or not you're taking the right steps to get there, right? And that's the next step. It's kind of finding that pathway. So there, again, part of it is vehicles, and I don't think we want to get too into the weeds, but there's many different vehicles, right, that can accomplish that. Part of it is that clarity process, which is kind of what we just discussed, where you start to figure out what are we really trying to accomplish. But I like anecdotes, so if you don't mind, I'll give you some stories, because I have them constantly. So even this week, right, you have somebody who comes in and says, I want to invest this money. I'm planning on leaving it behind for my kids and grandkids, so let's be aggressive, right? But as we're having that conversation, okay, what does that mean to you? What is this kind of aggressiveness look like? And then also we start talking about kind of their background, what their knowledge is, what their overall picture is, and we're just having a conversation. But I'm starting to hear that maybe they're not quite as comfortable in their situation as what they initially said. Because initially it was, I don't need this at all. Let's just put it here, and I don't care what happens to it. To, well, maybe things are okay over here, but they could be shaky if we see, something untoward happen in the markets, right?
Right.
So that conversation ends in a totally different place, because now it's, okay, well, what if we still invest this, but we do it in such a way that maybe we go for a little bit less volatility, and we do it so it's creating some income, and so it still has the possibility to grow. But should you ever need to tap into that, it's going to be geared towards that already, as opposed to having to do a radical shift if things go a different way. So again, it's through having those nuanced conversations, and just kind of identifying what we're really trying to accomplish. Also, it goes beyond just the financial conversation or just the product conversation, because I had another one recently, and you'll appreciate this, I think, as a realtor, John. I had a client who was really concerned because they had to move. And they're looking around and they're like, it is crazy out here, right? I mean, it's a pretty difficult rental market.
Yep.
And they were really concerned because their rent hadn't gone up for a number of years, so they were shocked, really a sticker shock, and they were on kind of a fixed income. So, but then we started having the conversation, well, why do you have to move? The duplex that we're living in is being sold. Okay, well, what's it being sold for? And so now we start to run the numbers and say, well, based on what you're telling me you're paying, and there's already a tenant in place, you'd actually be paying less if we bought it. And it's, well, I don't think we can do that, because they're under the impression that being on a fixed income, they won't qualify. But I'm looking at the whole financial picture. I have a background in this as well. So I get them in touch with the mortgage broker. Sure enough, they end up buying the duplex. Their financial picture now has radically shifted, right? Next 10, 15 years, they're paying less, they're building equity. It worked out great. And they have that stress removed. They don't have to move. They don't have to go and pay more elsewhere. It was really a great situation. And those are the type of things that, to me, is part of that holistic planning. It's having a conversation beyond me just telling you, oh, this stock, this is how this works, this is how that works, and, get your money invested in one of these. It's really getting down to what are we trying to accomplish, and there's a multifaceted way that we can do it.
Well, and I appreciate everything you just said, because I may have to steal that line from you, holistic planning. One, I like it because it is so much more of a relaxed conversation versus financial planning or financial advising.
Right.
That to me, it softens it. But I think people need to hear the story, because do you make money if they make if they don't make money?
So yes, well, I mean, it depends really on the way it's set up.
Right?
What's that?
I said it's kind of a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it depends. So you can set accounts up a multitude of ways, but I would say the most standard model right now, like that assets under management model, yes, that's going to be something where you get paid regardless. Now, of course, you hope to see it grow because you get paid more if you do, right?
That's the clarity part. Okay,
right.
And I will stop you right there, because I think people need to hear that side of it, because even like realtors, we can go to work for somebody for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, show them houses every day.
Right.
And if their loyalty takes them somewhere else on a whim, and we just put 4 weeks of work in and we lost the customer.
Yes.
Well, you get paid no money on that.
Right.
And because you're working at the sale, you're working for the back end of it. You guys still do that too. But yes, there's some pay up front, but strategically you're building the future, not just for them, but you're looking at yourself too, because you're a financial planner, you're a financial advisor, and I think that right there is kind of a fear factor for a lot of people. Oh, he's getting paid anyway, he's making all his money off of me. Well,
sure.
Strategically, that's not really a fact.
Right. Yeah.
And I want you to just, I think you're going to address your side of it much more graceful than I just did, but kind of explain that in the working man's terms, that, we're here not just for the support, but we're here for long term.
No, absolutely. And so I think there's two pieces to that. And so maybe I'll start with, in terms of long-term, that's part of and this is not, my business model is not everybody's business model, right? So I can't speak for all advisors, but being that we are doing holistic planning, you'll probably get a sense of that pretty quickly. Generally, I'm going to have 2 to 3 meetings, right, when somebody comes in before we even really start getting into account opening stuff. So similar to a realtor, I've done quite a bit of work. So that takes place over, multiple weeks or more months, just so that we can make sure we're doing the right thing and everybody's comfortable and on board. But you're going to get a sense very early on that, wow, this person's really trying to project outward. They're really kind of getting into more than just what happens today, tomorrow, 6 months from now, right? And if all I was interested in is getting it done right now, then I'd probably have a different process. I think the other piece of that is another story, I guess. So when I was doing the houses, and again, you think you'll be able to relate to this, John, there were a lot of people that would be like, Greg, why are you using a realtor, right? Just stop using the realtor, cut the realtor out. You're paying out all of this money in commissions, right? So I actually went and I sat and I took the hours right there next to the Harley shop. They used to have the school there, right? So I went there and I sat for the course. I never sat for the test to get the licensing. And I think it was because it never quite felt right to me. And looking back on it now, I'm really glad that I did it the way that I did it. And I'll tell you, this is why. There was twice that I can say for certain that deals would have fallen apart. One, the realtor not only closed the deal, but actually got it at a lower price than what I had tried to get in there for, right? So they saved the deal and negotiated lower. And then the second time, it would have fallen apart, but they found a way to creatively structure the deal. Me and the buyer were just kind of far apart. Something happened. They came up with a creative way to bring us together. That's because they had several years of experience and they do it all day, every day. And so they knew a way to get this thing done, right? Those 2 deals more than justified every other commission I ever paid them, So, even if you wanted to say, and it's certainly even in the other, when things were going without a hitch, they were still doing work. There's still work to be done. And I was glad to have somebody else taking care of that so that I could focus on what I was good at, right? And so that's part of it too. I mean, anybody capacity-wise is probably capable of doing most jobs. The question is, what have you decided to focus your time at? And do you want to become an expert in everything? Because that starts to get unrealistic, right? So you have to pick and choose. So I knew that I could focus my time into certain areas of the housing, and the realtor thing I left to somebody else who did it all the time. But again, looking back and I can see those 2 deals more than justified it. Now, you don't know what you don't know. So had I have taken other people's advice and never saw that happen, I probably would be saying right now, oh, I'm so glad that I did it on my own, right? But I can absolutely look back and say, wow, thank God I had a professional there. And I think that the financial services industry works very much the same. It's not to say that you can't, handle some of your own financial needs. You can, but there is something to be said for having a professional who does it all day, every day, who knows it intimately. Financial products can be complex, which is part of the reason why I think people are sometimes intimidated by them. That's unfortunate because this is kind of a catch-22, because also understanding them and deploying them correctly is extremely important to getting ideal results, right? So, being able to bridge that gap there is really important. And again, it's why I say, because we have this happen a lot, I get self-directed individuals who are knowledgeable. They've been investing on their own for some time diligently. So they have certain precepts down. And they tend to come in kind of, it just has happened twice in the last 2 weeks. They come in, usually ends up being like a spouse that set up the meeting, and the other spouse, in this case, it ended up being a husband and wife. Both times the wife set up the meeting. The husband was kind of like, I really don't want to be here, right? Because they've been doing it on their own and they're like, what do I need you for? But as we sat down and started to kind of look over it, and I started to show them some other avenues to accomplish what they were already doing, I think showing them the cost on it, even because some of these people typically are really fee sensitive, going back to that kind of how do you charge conversation. But again, knowing how to kind of structure these and just bringing in other pieces like tax awareness and things like that. Certain dollar amounts that allow for separately managed accounts, not to get, again, too into the weeds, but they operate very similar to a mutual fund, but have certain distinctions. And if you have enough money for them, they can also be cheaper than what a comparable mutual fund would be in terms of internal expenses. So we start going through the whole thing, and they're saying, oh, wow, I'm really not paying that much more, and I'm getting a whole lot more in service, and I didn't even know this existed, right?
Right.
So yeah, and that's really what we look for, is just the opportunity to have that conversation. If that doesn't work out, then by all means, and I'll be the first one to tell you, you don't need me, you know. But it's just oftentimes it's like, hey, I can actually add value here, and you know, then people's ears perk up.
Well, and I'm going to ask you this because I believe it's something you can answer with a straight face, because you just said, I would advise you don't need me if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers aren't very often, are they? Where you can't take and analyze something and say, nope, everything is 100% perfect. You don't. Really,
yeah,
I'm
100%.
Just setting a table for people. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So I would say the vast majority of the time, we end up finding something that either, you know, wasn't entirely understood or can be optimized another way, and that is, you know, 90% of the time that ends up being the case. Oftentimes, though, when I do have cases that, in fact, there's only been, I probably count on one hand the amount of times somebody has come in with a complex situation. And, you know, they've been self-directed. So again, they're doing well, but everything's relative, right? And you can kind of get this false sense of complacency when you look at your account and you say, well, I have a pretty good nest egg here. That's great, and kudos to you. But don't allow that to blind you to being able to optimize it, because if you can get a little bit better, sometimes that little bit can add up to be a lot, right, over a period of time, which ironically is precisely the reason why they're sometimes avoiding having the conversation, because they're afraid to pay out a little bit, because they say, well, a little bit over time can add to a lot, but that cuts both ways. So rarely with somebody with a complex situation do I see them come in and not be able to add value. Where it's more likely is sometimes when we get, you know, kind of younger adults that, you know, they come in, they don't really have a lot of disposable income, but they are maybe taking, you know, maybe they have a workplace retirement, like a qualified plan, 401k or simple IRA, something like that. And then we'll have a brief conversation kind of about, well, how much are we contributing there, and maybe a little bit about how we can structure it. Because some people are, you know, they're saving more in their savings account than what they need to be, and they're not contributing to these tax advantage accounts, and that may not make sense. If I can get you sorted out in a conversation like that, there's really no need for me to open an account for you, right? So we do have that happen from time to time.
Yeah. Well, and I like to hear that side of it too, because it's what makes the industry credible, is when you actually have both sides, and you can say, listen, there are people that come in and yeah, I might tweak a couple things for them, but strategically they've done a great job on their own. So it's just maybe an advice here, advice there. And because you're not trying to capture, even though people think this, I'm a realtor. I'm not trying to capture 100% of the business. I don't even know what I would do if I captured, 50% of the business, let alone 100% of the business. You're no different. It's just trying to get that piece of the pie and build the book, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in building the book, I go right back to the holistic side of things. I think that approach is really graceful. And I think everything you just said is very graceful. So I'm going to take one quick second and reintroduce you, because we have managed to talk for almost 29 minutes straight.
Oh, wow.
That goes pretty quick, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. So this is John Rawlings with Real Talk Radio 97.5 FM and KDWRadio.com. We're live with Greg Ordmandy, and we're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. You can follow us at Real Talk 97.5 FM. We're really just having an open discussion about financial planning and why people should have less fear in, maybe just sitting down and asking some questions. And I like Greg's answer earlier that, maybe the biggest thing is to try to educate people and get everything involved. And at the same time, maybe dissect some things that may make you more money in the end. And I want to start this segment out with asking you a question and letting you dive headfirst into it, because I know you're going to run with this for a little bit. We're in the month of November, November 19th. We have a little over 40 days left in the year. If I was a consumer and I have not done anything, and I'm at that combined income of $60,000, husband, wife, no kids, I'm at $60,000, and I'm thinking, holy Toledo, I just went up 10 grand this year on my income. Things are going to be a little different. How do I strategically set myself up for success with Uncle Sam? Is there some strategic moves that you would recommend for someone who hasn't looked at that? And I'm going to follow that up with question B. If you invest your money and you do it strategically, can a working class family or person invest that money and shift their funds from the paycheck and maybe not feel as much of the damage from take-home money if they invest the right way?
Yeah, so those are great questions. So I think to address the first one, yes, definitely the end of year planning, is extremely important. There's some tax considerations that come in that are going to get ready to expire at the end of the year, right? So, and there's a number of those I can kind of circle back to, but to speak more specifically to the circumstance that you said. So if you had somebody that around that $60,000 range and they're saying, what can I do here? And I think, again, I would probably start with the same question I indicated earlier, which would be to look at whether or not they have qualified plans, right? Because if they have a qualified plan, that's a very kind of quick way because they already have it set up. It's already available to them. Or if it is already available to them, they would definitely want to utilize that should they be able to, right? If you have the income, you're saying I have $10,000 more this year, and I know I need to start saving for my retirement. I need to start thinking about the future. Then yeah, that's probably the first place that you want to go. They generally are pretty well regarded in terms of costs, tend to be lower costs, and you're going to get that tax savings up front, depending on which vehicle you use. But if you're using a qualified plan like a 401k or a regular IRA, which you can use outside of your employer and set up for yourself. But in either case, you get to take that deduction, right, on whatever you put in. So Uncle Sam is going to incentivize you saving. So if you're going to save the money either way, you have the choice between going and putting into a savings account that you're going to let it sit there, or maybe you're going to invest it and you're going to put it into a taxable account. It makes a lot more sense for you to go and to put it into one of these tax benefited accounts, these qualified plans that will allow you to take that deduction, save some money on your taxes when that time comes in April. At the same time, it will continue to grow without you having to pay taxes on it. Whereas if you were to do it in a taxable account, every time you make changes, every time there's a taxable distribution in the forms of dividends or capital gains, that's all a taxable event for you every year, all the way up until the point that you retire. So if you know that you're earmarking that for retirement, you want to put it in a place that's going to benefit you a little more, and that would be a quick way to do it. I think that in terms of the second piece of it, and you mentioned the word a couple of times now, John, that I think is an important word. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about it, which was strategy, right? And that's so important. That word is so important and so often overlooked, particularly right now, because there's a little bit of maybe FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, right? You've got some of the high flyers, the meme stocks, right? There's some stuff that's going on that makes you really tempted to just jump right in there. And we're seeing quite a bit of that. That's not the same thing as having a strategy. There's an old military saying you're probably familiar with, maybe it originated outside of the military, but failing to plan is planning to fail, right? Yep. Right. So, with stocks kind of near those all-time highs, we're seeing quite a bit of this where people are putting their money to work, but they're not doing it in a way that's strategic. They're doing at best what we would call kind of like a tactical, technical allocation. They're kind of doing these momentum trades, trying to catch things on the way up and believing that they're going to get in and out at the right times, which over a long period of time is very, very difficult to recreate. The strategy is what allows you to kind of stay consistent, to remove the emotion from the investing, to be prepared for those downturns, because we'll have those conversations. We'll be very realistic about what the market historically has looked like, and make sure that we're prepared for that. And we're at a level that we're comfortable with. And that's key, I think, to staying consistent just in terms of investor behavior. There's also making sure that it fits into your overall plan, kind of going back to the story earlier about the grandparent, but just making sure that what you're doing is consistent with all of those other pieces, because if it's not, then when problems start to happen, it will fall apart, right? So you have to make sure that it all fits kind of neatly. I think that, so this is another story of this maybe is how we're running through it so fast, but and I'm not a historian, but I just love a good story. I think back to Hannibal, right? Like Hannibal of Carthage was like this great general running amok in Rome, right? And the Romans just could not stop him, right? And it was because he was a beautiful tactician. You just could not meet him in open battle and seem to win. The guy was crafty. He's famed for the elephants, or for tying torches to the horns of cows and sending them moving somewhere at night, so that the enemy thought that it was a troop movement, right? And positioning him. So just tactically, the man was a genius. So what did they do? Well, Fabius ended up being their answer. And Fabius came up with a totally different approach, which was a strategic approach, right? Forget trying to meet this guy tactically, because that's a losing battle for us. We just can't outdo him. But they took a long-term strategy. They didn't necessarily fight Hannibal in the places Hannibal thought that they were going to fight him, right? They would harry him along the way, or pick fights in places where they really didn't expect to. And so it wasn't so much about momentum, but it was a long-term strategy they developed. And in fact, it became known as the Fabian strategy, and was used even in the American Revolution, and is still taught in military strategy today. So it's just a nice little anecdote going back thousands of years, the difference between kind of that tactical approach, which is great where it fits in. But if you're talking having just a tactical approach versus a strategic approach, strategy is where it's at. You need to make sure you have a well thought out strategy. And so that would then bring me into the next kind of piece with our talking to our viewers, is to ask yourself, do you have that strategy, right? Have you really sat down and thought it through? Or another way to look at it is your financial health important to you, right? How much of your life right now revolves around your financial picture? Because for a lot of people, if their financial picture shifted radically, so would their day, right? Their life, what they did day in, day out, would probably be a little bit different. So
actually, that just happened for a lot of people with the pandemic.
It did. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it can go either way. You're right. So if it goes in a negative way, then all of a sudden you see life looks quite a bit different. And same thing if it goes the other way. If things go really well, you're probably going to do things slightly different. That's going to be true for the future you as well, right? So the future your financial well-being is going to matter to you in 10, 20, 30 years, without a doubt. So if that part's true, well, you can make some analogies that fit pretty well. I mean, your regular health is important to you for very much the same reason, right? Because you want to make sure that you're around to enjoy those later years, right? And do the things that you want to do and accomplish your hopes and dreams that you kind of spend your days thinking about. And so we go to doctors, and we have health insurance to avoid kind of cataclysmic, failures, right? So if you understand why you take those type of steps, then I think you can ask yourself and have an honest conversation with yourself about, am I doing the same thing for my financial well-being? And if not, why? Right. So I think that there was one other question that you asked me, and now it was a two-part question that I kind of ran.
Well, it was the tax deduction, but before I get to that, I'll come back to that, I want you to go ahead and give your contact information out, because we're going to do it right at the end of the show also. But
okay.
We've started this conversation out about learning who you were. You used some really key information, the holistic planning, the things like taking the fear out of at least a conversation. And I think on top of that, throwing the word education in there. Truthfully, I'm an educational seller. I educate my customer from start to finish.
Right.
So that they can make good, sound, strong decisions. That's how I operate my business, and it strategically, that kind of sounds like how you do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in that. And yeah, just so to give out my information. So my phone number here is 941 235-3043. You can also email me, and my name's here. So it's greg.ordmandy, that's ORDMANDY at raymondjames.com.
Do you have a website, Greg?
So we do. So our actual business page is under construction right now. So I wouldn't direct you there. I would say that we have a Facebook page. So you can always go on there. I put up kind of daily commentary. So even if you're just interested in seeing on what Raymond James' take is from day to day, or if we do a weekly recap as well, that'll be on there.
And what's the Facebook page?
So the Facebook page will be Greg Ordmandy Somerville Financial Group.
And if Maria is doing what I think she's doing, she's scrambling back behind the scenes right now to pull that information up. And it's a blessing to have Marie in the back as part of my team because it really adds a lot of momentum to shows like this because we get data raw right up front. You have a great team also, don't you? Behind you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, my team has been phenomenal. So again, Neil Kazanovsky and Randall Francis are my two partners that I work with. They both have over 20 years in the industry. And again, they've been working together for 20 years, which I just think is great. That's really a dynamic that I love about the team because when people work together for that long, it's like they can finish each other's sentences, right? And yet we all have a different approach, right? We all have a slightly different way of how we interact with our clients, even though we have regular meetings, probably daily at a minimum, weekly. So we have the same strategies. We make sure that we're all kind of, getting our inputs on where we think things are headed, and any kind of market commentary that we need to review that's relevant to us and to our clients. But it's also a nice feature because, clients, maybe they don't mesh with me and they get along great with Randy just on a personality side, right? So it's nice to have those options, and that's okay with us, and we do that regularly. I would also say that another advantage to having the team set up the way that it is that we're staggered in ages, right? So Neil, don't tell anybody I said it, but no, I think Neil's getting ready to turn 70, right? Randy's in his mid-50s. I'm in my mid-30s. So we very much have the capabilities to be, not just a multi-generational office, but even for our early retirees, people that are just kind of starting off in retirement, when we put a plan in place, we have the ability to see that plan all the way through, right? Like ideally, I will be there with you all the way through that plan. So yeah, so this is the business page. This is the one that's being updated right now. So I'm not sure how current some of this will be. But you probably have.
The nice thing is it's being updated. So the Somerville Raymond James, if they typed in Somerville Raymond James in Facebook, would they be able to find you on Facebook?
Yeah, they should be able to find us on Facebook. Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome.
And you can still probably reach out to us via email. But like I said, the website is just currently, and I think they gave us a couple months timeline on it because they're redoing a bunch of these websites all at once. So.
Well, this is the time of year to kind of freshen that up, but I want to go back because believe it or not, we're at the 43-minute mark now. Wow. And we go about 55 minutes. And okay. So we've got maybe 12, 11 minutes left. But I want to go back to the second part of that question I asked you because I think it's valuable for listeners today to start the last 40, 45 days of the year, maybe set themselves up for a good finish if they haven't invested the right way. Mm-hmm. But it was about taxes, about strategic planning. If you did make that extra $10,000 this year and you haven't done anything and you're thinking, if I talk to somebody, they're going to take my paycheck right. And I feel the brunt of it and I just got a raise. Isn't there a strategic way to invest money pre-tax even?
No, exactly. So that's
that blunt on your paycheck, right?
Yeah, because what that would do is it was going to mitigate some of that pain, right? Because you're getting that money in, but then you're going to be getting a little bit back in terms of on taxes. So it offsets it depending on what your tax rate is. you're going to offset it by whatever that percentage is, because you are going to get a bump in terms of that tax benefit from you taking that. So if you put $100 into, just as a rough number, if I put $100 into an account and I'm in the 37% tax bracket, well, I'm getting 37% of that back in savings, right? So that's kind of the way that people would try to, I think, mentally prepare themselves for, okay, you know what, this really isn't as big of a deal as what it would have been, because had I taken that $100 myself, conversely, then I would have gotten, 63 out of the 100 in that 37% example again. There are also some other things, and this may not speak as much to the person with the raise as it would be to some of our retirees, but I know that we have a lot of, retirees in this community. So this is also the time that we start looking into like tax loss harvesting. It depends on how you have your money, what vehicles it's in, as to whether or not that's doable. But it's definitely worth speaking to your advisor about, or reaching out to us, and we're happy to have the conversation. Oftentimes, if you have a well-diversified portfolio, you are going to have some positions that are up and some that are probably going to be down. This might sound counterintuitive, but if all of your positions are up at the same time, it's not really a great portfolio, because that also means that then when circumstances change, they would all be down at the same time, right? But what you can do there is you can sell out of the ones that are down, and then buy something that's similar. So you still keep the asset allocation, but you're now realizing the loss, right? And that can offset the gains that you have in other areas. And so that's another way to be tax savvy at the end of the year. There's also, and this is one, because I know we're getting towards the end, this is one that I'm passionate about, so I just wanted to mention. I also love working with charities and people with charitable hearts, right? People that are inclined to charitably give. And that can be giving through volunteer work. That can be giving through, donating your expertise to different organizations, or it can be through money. This goes into the holistic planning too. I do this a lot. We get a lot of people that are just entering into retirement. And so we're also having conversations where maybe they want to take up a part-time job. Oftentimes they don't need to, they're just interested in it. And so we have a conversation surrounding, what does that look like, and what type of job would be most ideal for you so that you're happy with your decision? Or what organizations do you want to get involved in? The other piece to this, though, is that there's some really powerful tax savings that you can get through different charitable endeavors. So just to run you through a couple of them, probably the most straightforward is like a tactic called bunching. What bunching is say you gave $10,000 a year to a charity, and you also would take the standard deduction, right? So you're taking your $24,000 or whatever that may be. If you look at that over a 4-year time frame, and I don't have a chart to pull up for you guys to show you, it'd be easier on the graphic, but what you can do is you can bunch it. So 1 year you take 2 years worth, and now your standard deduction, you don't take a standard deduction, you itemize, because you can use that to increase the amount that you would usually itemize. Then the next year you take your standard deduction and you don't give anything, right? The following year you do 2 years and 1 year again. And at the end of it, you can see a tax savings, like on the chart that I usually show, where you're getting to write off like an extra almost $20,000, $18,000 over like a 4 or 5 year time frame. And many people give to charities that they're interested in for decades. So that can, decade or two or more. So that can really add up. There's donor advised funds. There's different, for people that are taking RMDs, if you're over 72, if you're 72 or above, there's ways to do like a qualified charitable distribution there, so that you don't take the money, have to get taxed on it, and then turn around and pay the rest of the charity. You can just have it sent directly to the charity. They don't pay the tax. For people that are higher net worth, there's also some trusts that are really interesting, but for time's sake, I probably won't jump into them here. What I will mention is that the Military Heritage Museum, have you been there at all, John?
Yep. And okay, we have them on the show on occasion. Marie actually has them on her show on occasion.
Okay, so great.
They're very active with WKDW.
And they'll be on Giving Tuesday. We will be taking a tour on StreamYard and at the radio station. You'll be able to see the Military Heritage Museum.
That's for great. Those of you who don't know, that's Marie, and she's also a radio show host, but she's my backstage do everything for me type person. But Marie's fantastic and does a great show. But go ahead, Greg.
So on Giving Tuesday, actually on November 30th, we will actually be hosting a workshop there. So there'll be an after hours tour at the museum. There'll be some refreshments, but they'll also have me up there doing a seminar kind of workshop for those that are charitably inclined. This is open to, you don't have to be affiliated with the museum. If you're on the board of any charity in the area, if you're involved in any charity, if you're looking for charities to get involved with, the museum was just gracious enough to open up their theater and allow that to be the platform to host us. But yeah, we'll be having conversations about different strategies and get a little more in depth on it. There should be some really good information, and I'm excited for that. So that's coming up on November 30th at 5:00.
And John, I'm coming back on. I'm just staying off. Seeing as we're the Center for Giving Tuesday, and I don't think you knew that, Greg, but at the radio station we are, and I'm the chair of the Giving Tuesday. That's why we have all these nonprofits and businesses that give back. And I'll even give you some opportunity to come on the radio that day. But one of the things that we are explaining to people, if you don't have to give money, people out there. It's your time, your talent, volunteer, give your skills, help a neighbor, visit a senior. Give your voice, sign a petition, depends. Speak up for a cause, give money, donate, or fundraise for a nonprofit. There's a lot of easy ways to do that through social media. Give goods, organize a supply drive, donate clothes, and most of all, kindness. Send a card to a senior or a shutout. Buy someone lunch. Compliment a stranger. Be kind and respectful to that. Those servers and fast food clerks, man, they need us to be kind out there. I don't want to do that job. Do you guys?
Nope. And one other thing I'd like to tell Greg is that if you get that information, you can email it over to me about the Heritage Foundation. Okay. If you send that over to me, I'll get it into the radio station, and we will do a what, Marie?
They're called PSAs, public service announcements, and they're free of charge. Actually, we're all volunteer 501c3 radio stations. So
you out there, if you put that information, we'll get it out on the air, and we'll start promoting it right now for you.
Great,
Gary Butler sent out something, so I may already have it. So okay, I'll see if I can.
We've got 1 minute left. I want to make sure that you get a chance. I mean, what you're doing is fantastic, because what you just explained was really giving back to a lot of nonprofit organizations and getting them educated to how they can maximize what they bring in and strategically, correct?
Absolutely. No, without a doubt. And that's another thing. Having these conversations with your donors is immensely important, because sometimes they are not aware of how much more benefit that they can confer both to the charity that they're interested in and to themselves just by structuring it appropriately. So we've had some very productive conversations in that regard.
Well, and I'm going to add one more thing, and then I'm going to let you give your information. I'm not going to add it. I'm going to let you add it. I'm going to ask the question. Aren't there strategic changes to taxation each year? Seems like they're revamping wording. So in order to stay up and current on these things, what do you guys have to do?
Yeah, we will always have a job so long as Congress continues to go the way that they historically have, right? So yes, they are constantly making changes, and then those changes have to be interpreted, and then we see what they mean for our clients, and that is pretty much a yearly endeavor.
But give your contact information, because that by itself has so much value to somebody who's investing, who's working full time. It's not funny. But go ahead and give your contact information.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I see that some of it's here on the screen. So if you're looking to call the office, the main line, that's the 627-4774. But you can also reach out to me directly. So my direct office line, if you were to call it now, you hear ringing in the background. That's 941-235-3043. Or you can reach out to me via email if you want to start off the conversation that way. And that's greg.ordmandy. That's ORDMANDY @raymondjames.com.
One, I want to thank you for your time. This has been a great show. I hope you'll come back. I'd love to do this.
Absolutely.
Once the month even, because I think there's a lot of things happening out there, especially ending the year and starting the year. I think people need to get educated at the end, and they need to be educated up front too, for the start of the year. But thank you so much. I have to get off the air before I get in trouble, but thanks for being part of the show. This is John Rawlings with Greg Ordmandy from Raymond James. He's been fantastic. If you need anything, give him a call. I appreciate your time, Greg. You have a good night. Okay.
Thank you, John. You too. Enjoy your weekend.
All right. Talk to you soon, my friend.